It feels like over the weekend, every single FPL relevant midfielder got a return, whether it was Brighton MBEUMO scoring, Semenyo getting more assists, or Florian Wirtz finding the back of the net once again in pre-season. And it's had us changing our midfields once again. Should we be spending the money there? Should we still be backing the cheap midfielders in the likes of Enzo Laffi, Sangari of Brentford, or Pascal Gross? Are there even cheaper ones that we can buy like Gomez of Brighton? And how does that impact the rest of our teams? We're going to discuss all of that. Where should you be spending the money? Is Bruno essential when you could afford lots of other players in his place? There is so much to talk about our midfields right now. What is up, everyone? FPL Harry here. Before we dive in, 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you are new around here. And this is day 2 of a 3-day mini series. We've got defenders yesterday. If you haven't watched that already, I really would recommend. Lots of interesting stuff about defenses and defenders in particular. And then midfielders and forwards will be out tomorrow. And we'll be talking a little bit today about combination. Should you be investing in your midfield? And if so, what is the knock-on impact of that on your defense or your forward line in terms of predicted points? Now, all of this, including those predicted points, can be taken from the Fantasy Football Scout members area. They do have free tools like the Rate My Team tool if you want to see what your draft will get out of 100. If you also want to have a look at their fixture ticker, all of that is completely free. But the data that I use to really make my decisions, build some of the tables, and also have a look at their predicted points is all part of their members area. And I use it probably every single day over the course of preseason and throughout the season to hopefully make my decisions better and hopefully make me a better FPL manager as well. You can check it out with a link in the description or with a QR code up on screen, and they are offering a big discount during pre-season. But let's have a look at some of the data. And it's not really a surprise that we've got Manchester City, Chelsea, Arsenal, Man United, and Liverpool really up there as some of the best attacks to start the season with. The other one that I didn't just mention is Brighton, also sitting within the top 6. Their opening run of fixtures are not quite as good though. We will talk about some of those Brighton cheaper midfielders as they offer quite nice enablers if you're ready to rotate them into your team. So to be honest, the 6 best attacks that we had last year are making up the majority of all our FPL midfields. So that does bode quite well for a pretty strong start to the season. Manchester City right up at the top. Now, they don't have Pep Guardiola. They have players returning late to pre-season from the World Cup, but I still expect them to do very well. Chelsea, similar. We've got a new manager coming in there, uncertain completely about what system they're going to play. Is Palmer going to be back? Maybe we should be focusing on their forward in João Pedro. Arsenal are the interesting one, and we won't talk too much about Arsenal attackers because I still recommend focusing more on their defense. I don't know if there's any attacker in particular who I think is reliable enough for goals. Man United, it's MBEUMO versus Bruno Fernandes. I don't think Matheus Cunha is really worth it. Brighton and Liverpool, again, there is a lot of value in some of these teams. The best runs of fixtures, the best players, and the best attacks are all at the top of this ticker. And over the past sort of week in FPL, Szoboszlai has been one of the players who I've seen transferred out most from a lot of people's draft. He is still a good pick and he is still very popular, but he is dropping in ownership with people moving away, a lot of which is to Florian Wirtz. Now, just to have a bit of discussion about both of these. If you remember back to last year, I'm going to use a lot of analogies around how they compare to different players in the Bournemouth lineup last year. Of course, they had Iraola as their manager, who is now at Liverpool. Last year, they lined up Bournemouth in a 4-2-3-1, which is what we expect Liverpool to do. But that number 10, that player behind the striker, was often Kruppi Jr. So they effectively ended up playing a front 2. And that is where Florian Wirtz is going to play. He is in that Kruppi Jr. role. We've already heard Iraola say during pre-season that he is that second striker. He is just behind supporting Alexander Isak, whereas Szoboszlai is playing more like a number 8, closer to the Alex Scott role. He's slightly more box to box, slightly more attacking than maybe what we got from Alex Scott last year. But if you're trying to picture what you're going to get from those two players, that is roughly what we're going to see. Now, so far in pre-season, Florian Wirtz has scored in both of the games that he's played in, whereas Dominik Szoboszlai has just 1 goal, a nice goal from distance, a long-range shot, and 2 assists in the 4 matches. So attacking returns might start to slightly favour Florian Wirtz, but he is 0.5 more expensive, and in game week 1, that can go a long way. when you start to add in defensive contributions for Szoboszlai, there's lots of interesting data saying his DEFCON last year was great. He hit it in 1 in 3 matches. He averaged almost 10 DEFCON per 90. But if you actually isolate the matches where he played in midfield for the whole game and didn't fill in at right back at all, whether he started there or finished the game there, played some of the minutes at right back, he only had a 12% DEFCON hit rate, which isn't very good. Now, I expect it to be slightly higher as he will be playing deeper. He played some games in midfield in an attacking position out on that right wing, but I don't think we are expecting Dominik Szoboszlai to maybe get any higher than maybe a 25% DEFCON hit rate going into the new season. So it's not going to be a crazy impact on his overall points. So we're still needing some attacking returns, and you might understand where I'm starting to lead with this. Now, in terms of value, I think Szoboszlai is a safer pick. I like him for the long term. But there is part of me that thinks explosivity, if you've got Florian Wirtz, he is the one that has the highest ceiling to score goals early on. Now, 0.5 early on is really valuable, so I still plan on sticking with Dominik Szoboszlai. It's whether I go for a double up with Florian Wirtz on top of that. Now, next up, we want to talk about the cheap Brighton midfielders. And the three we're really talking about are Ayari and Gomez and Pascal Gross. Now, Pascal Gross is the sensible. He's probably the best option. Set pieces, penalties, and decent open play threat. When we're looking at them during pre-season, I've actually been slightly more impressed with his positioning compared to what I was at the end of last year when I decided to go for Hinshelwood, who's now 6 million over him, because I thought Hinshelwood's open play threat was definitely better. And I would probably say that, but 6 million for Hinshelwood is just too much money. Ayari scored twice in the most recent preseason friendly, but I would still always go for a penalty taker and a set piece taker in Pascal Gross over him. Ayari was also good at the World Cup, but I still would go with Pascal Gross. We've heard from the manager that there is a slightly bigger focus on set pieces going into the new season and getting them to lead to more goal scoring opportunities, which again means that Pascal Gross should be a nice safe pick. But if you need a bit of money again, Gomez should be starting the first few games of the season, particularly until Mitoma is back from injury. Chances are that won't be until the first international break, meaning the first 5 matches of the season. Gomez at 5 million should be starting on the wing. With Villa at home, Leeds at home, Coventry away in the first 5. That's a pretty nice pick, especially if you're needing a cheap option to bench boost in game week 1, a differential on top of someone like a Sangare or a Norgard that other people are looking at. The only thing to mention with Brighton, though, is the Thursday night before game week 1, they have an away leg in a Europa Conference League qualifier. And then the following Thursday before game week 2, they have the second leg of that. That does mean players who are slightly less nailed, maybe like a Gomez, Ayari, although with Baliba's injury, Ayari is pretty nailed. It might mean they don't play as many minutes. They're not fully nailed. That's why Pascal Gross does just feel the safest. But if you want to, or you want a cheaper one, I do like Gomez at 5 million. Next up is a player that I absolutely loved last year, is Elliot Anderson, and I think he will be a good pick this year, but I'm just not certain about him as a game week 1 option. And a lot of that revolves around exactly where he's going to play, his DEFCON potential, and availability, really. Now, someone like Erling Haaland, I have more confidence will be ready to start in game week 1, because although there's a new manager and he's late back from the World Cup, he's integrating back into a squad that he knows very well. He's played alongside almost all of those players for a couple of seasons now, whereas Anderson is not only late back from the World Cup, having played a lot of minutes, it's a manager he's not worked under before, and it's a lot of players to transition to be ready to play with. Now, we do have the Community Shield at the weekend, and if he was to start that or get good minutes off the bench, then it might start to boost him up a little bit. I think his DEFCON numbers will drop slightly. Now, if we head over quickly to the Fantasy Football Scout members area, one of the things I like to do there is look at historical DEFCON numbers, and Rodri is fantastic for them, actually. I think a lot of people predict, because Manchester City keep more of the ball, Rodri's DEFCON won't be that great. He has been very good for DEFCON over the past couple of years, and if he leaves for Barcelona or he's injured, that means Anderson will be doing a lot of that mop-up work, those recoveries and tackles in midfield. A lot of it will rely and revolve around Elliot Anderson. So I really like him. I think he's priced well. I think he's a good pick. I think we will be considering him. I just am not certain if he's definitely going to start the season. Now, another midfielder that I think we should maybe start to consider because of one thing he did over the weekend is Caicedo of Chelsea. We all know he's a pretty good DEFCON player. He didn't hit it quite as much last year as he did the year before, just under 40% of matches, but add a few attacking returns that he gets from open play. He started last year really well. He starts to become quite a nice and reliable pick, but he doesn't compete with someone like a Sangare of Brentford, who's probably going to be better for DEFCON potential, or Pascal Gross, who's probably better for attacking returns. But if Caicedo does take more corners and more set pieces in the last couple of preseason friendlies, he will start to become quite popular as a cheap option for the start of the season. The issue is Reece James, potentially Enzo Fernandez if he stays, potentially Morgan Rogers if he's ready for the start of the season, could all take them over Caicedo. But he did pick up an assist from a corner for João Pedro, which is really, really interesting. We've got a new set piece coach in at Chelsea who might have said, you know what, I like Caicedo's delivery and he's going to take them. If he's going to do that, add DEFCON on top, plus some potential attacking returns from open play, he could be a great option at that price. So let's have a look at my top midfielders to buy and discuss a few other players that I know you're wanting to talk about. First of all is Bruno Fernandes. For me, he is the best midfielder in the game, but I'm starting to wonder if he's really worth the 12 million. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't own him for game week 1 and game week 2 because Hull and Ipswich is a great start to the season. They have the best 2 opening fixtures of any team in the Premier League going into the start of the new campaign. And looking at his data from last year, both the assist potential, which was very high, and is he going to replicate all of those assists again this year? Maybe not. But if you add on set pieces, you add on penalties, you add on open play threat, I think it's sensible to start the season with him. But I do think game week 3 and game week 4, Everton away, Manchester City at home, there will be people who look to free up some money by downgrading Bruno Fernandes. I don't expect us to own him for 38 weeks over the course of the season. In terms of other players that you will consider and other midfielders that I like, next up is Semenyo. He's been great in preseason, particularly assist threat, which I think is going to be a difference we see from him. We've heard from Maresca that he wants his wingers to be high and wide, and we've seen that. Semenyo actually playing on the left. Now, when Doku comes back, he probably will shift back to the right, with Doku going naturally back on the left. But his assist threat has looked really good. He's still cutting in a little bit. I still really like him. It's just the 8.5 million price tag. A lot of people have Bruno. You've got Szoboszlai. You've got Haaland. You've got João Pedro. So to fit Semenyo on top is quite difficult. Now, if you're looking to sacrifice one of Haaland or Bruno, then I would definitely go with Semenyo. Just if you have both of them, it can be quite difficult. Now, 0.5 million cheaper, if you want to target the early fixtures, is Brighton and MBEUMO, and you could even use that as an opportunity to wait and see on Manchester City. So start with MBEUMO, who is head and shoulders above Matheus Cunha. I had him in an earlier draft, Cunha. No way I own him in game week 1, when MBEUMO looks like he's almost certain to start the season as their striker. For Hull and Ipswich looks like a great pick. I really like him short term, but long term, again, Everton, City, Fulham, I'm not certain I love those, with 2 of those potentially easier fixtures being away from home. But starting the season with a double up when everyone's going to have Bruno as well, I really like MBEUMO. Next up is Gibbs White. I still think he's a really good pick. The data is great. The big chances he's getting are really, really good. I think he was 4th in the league for midfielders for big chances out of any player. Only above him were a couple of cheaper options who we'll talk about, but also Brighton and MBEUMO was top for big chances amongst all midfielders going into last season. But I really like Gibbs White. Leeds at home, Coventry at home is really good. Liverpool, Spurs, Villa, not quite as great, which as a result means I'm unlikely to start the season with him. But once we get to game week 5 or 6 and the fixtures start to get a bit better in game weeks 8 and 9, I think he will be quite a good pick. Next up is Dominic Szoboszlai. He has dropped down my ranking a little bit just based on what we said earlier around his preseason positioning, but he's a player you're never going to have a huge issue with. He's so reliable. His minutes are great, as you can see there. His DEFCON is still pretty good. He won't hit it every week like an Elliot Anderson, but if he hits it 1 in 4 or 1 in 3, that's still a pretty nice boost. Then I've got Cole Palmer, and as a Chelsea fan, I haven't seen enough for him to really be worthwhile buying at 9.5. But again, if you're not going Bruno or you're not going Haaland, I do think Palmer is worth a consideration. I do expect him to play more centrally. There's been a few moments over preseason when we've played a back four. He's been very wide, but I think we will do our best to bring him as centrally as possible alongside João Pedro and alongside Morgan Rogers. And I do think he will have a good season. Then at number 7 is Florian Wirtz. And to be honest, once you drop outside of these, it's all about saving money. Wirtz, I think, is a really nice pick. I'm going to continue to monitor him in preseason, particularly around the minutes he's playing and his positioning alongside Isak, who's also looked pretty good, but he is starting to creep onto radar. Then we've got Phil Foden. His minutes look great. He looks set to be taking up good positioning, but I've just not been sold about the performances. If you want a cheaper City mid that's not Semenyo, I would look at Foden, but I probably would just be saving the money. And to do that, I like Pascal Gross, and Iliman Ndiaye in at number 10 didn't take the Everton penalty in their most recent preseason friendly. I don't expect that to be a trend. I expect Iliman Ndiaye to still be on them despite that, but it does hamper him a little bit at 6 million. And then just going through quickly some of the cheaper midfielders. Number 1, Pascal Gross. Next up is Iliman Ndiaye. But if he doesn't take another penalty, he will drop almost off of this list completely. I know Everton don't get loads of penalties, but it is a boost to someone at that price. Next up is Enzo Laffi, who might end up above Ndiaye, but just the first couple of fixtures are great. But from game week 3 or 4 onwards, you're probably going to have an issue to potentially deal with, which is why he's not higher up this list. I think Harry Wilson will have a good season at Leeds. I think he'll be very nailed. The slight issue with him is you've got Calvert-Lewin on penalties at a cheaper price, who I probably prefer. But if you look at those opening 5 fixtures for Leeds, I think he could be a great pick. The reason he's above someone like an Ismail Assar, who is predicted to score more points over the first 6 weeks, is just based on those fixtures. Now, Sarr is predicted to do really well because his XG per 90 is fantastic. Out of all of the cheap midfielders, Sarr is top, but I still would take the fixtures on someone like Harry Wilson, particularly if you're bench boosting in either game week 1 or game week 2. But Sarr looks like a good pick. I expect his minutes to be strong, but they do have Europe, which of course Wilson doesn't have to compete with. Elsewhere at Leeds, you could go for Antoine Stack at 6 million. I think I would save the 0.5 and go for Ampadu. His DEFCON numbers are really good. He's only outshone by a player at a very same price in Sangare of Brentford, but Ampadu, you know what you're going to get with him. That's the thing with Sangare, and why he's not been in any of my drafts just yet, is he's new to the league. He's new to Brentford. His DEFCON per 90 is great, but is he going to play 90 for the start of the season? Is he going to transition to the league well early on? And when you look at Ampadu, he just feels safer. I do like Sangare. I think we'll own him a lot. He might be this year's Elliot Anderson, but I'm not certain for game week 1. Elsewhere, a few others that we discussed. Elliot Anderson, I've already spoken about. Dewsbury Hall, I like. 6.5 is probably 0.5 too much when you've got penalty takers at slightly cheaper. And at 5 million, you've got Gomez of Brighton, but Norgard, his DEFCON numbers are good. His attacking threat wasn't bad at Brentford. I quite like him if he looks set to start the season, which with Garner potentially out, it looks like he will. So the final thing I wanted to do is have a look at a few combinations. Should you be spending the money on Brighton and MBEUMO? Should you be saving it, going for a cheaper option to invest elsewhere? So what I've done is looked up a few different combinations of players on the Fantasy Football Scout app, looking at their predicted points for the first few weeks of the season and tried to compare them. So you've got Enzo Laffi and Virgil van Dijk, 2 mid-price players, so a cheaper mid and a more expensive defender, versus Brighton and MBEUMO and a popular Luke Shaw. You've got João Pedro and Pascal Gross, again, a cheaper mid, or you spend the money on a more expensive midfielder in Calvert-Lewin and then Dominic Szoboszlai, and then a slightly more complex option in Brighton and MBEUMO, Florian Wirtz, with 2 cheap defenders and Luke Shaw and a year of Brentford. And then you've got Sarr and Laffi, cheaper mids, but spending the money in defence on Vardiol and Mosquera. And really interestingly, the predicted points favors the expensive mid in every single one of the scenarios that I built. I actually built more than these 3, and every single one of them did favor those premium mids. My latest draft that I put out over the weekend only had Bruno, of course, and Szoboszlai, and I'm starting to wonder if I need to downgrade one of my defenders in order to upgrade to someone like MBEUMO, because as much as it's difficult to predict which one you definitely want long term, if you don't have space for any of them and one of them does really well, it will be difficult to find a way to buy them early on without using up all your transfers or potentially taking a hit. Whereas if it's Enzo Laffi, Pascal Gross, Ismail Assar, or someone else, it's very easy to get to them from someone like a Szoboszlai, whereas going up to them is a little bit harder. I just thought this was a really interesting way to tie this in, that although the value looks really good, and that's been where my mindset has been, the predicted points on the Scout website and a lot of other tools are saying that Brian MBEUMO, Florian Wirtz, maybe Antoine Semenyo and Dominic Szoboszlai might be worth the money, especially if you can rotate your defender. So this is looking at MBEUMO plus just Luke Shaw, but you might rotate Luke Shaw and not play him in all of those games, in which case those cheap defenders become even more valuable. We're going to wrap it up there. That is all for midfielders. We'll be back tomorrow for forwards before we get into the final week before game week 1, where we start to talk to a few more guests. We'll look at a few different drafts and we'll revisit some of those top 1K managers that you all loved earlier on in preseason. But we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you all for watching. Drop a like if you've enjoyed, subscribe if you are new, and I'll be back again very soon.